Hi, welcome to today's session. We're going to talk about how businesses are tackling talent challenges from within. The findings of the 2020 Aligning Opportunities Report highlight the prevailing talent gap in key demand job areas of business, healthcare, manufacturing, and IT. Today, we're going to learn a little bit about how companies are tackling their talent challenges from within. Participating in this session, you will get the following takeaway. You'll learn about creative solutions to talent challenges that can be implemented across your own organizations. And my name is Alan Nevel. I'm Senior Vice President, Chief Diversity and Human Resources Officer for the Metro Health System. I'm serving as your moderator, but our three distinguished panelists are Andy Jones, CEO at MCPc, Dr. Jody Berg, CEO at Vitamix, and Lindsey Domingo, Director of Organizational Development and Talent Management at Swagelok. What I'd like to do very quickly is ask each panelist to briefly introduce themselves. Tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're so passionate about this particular subject. Dr. Jody Berg, will you please take it away?
Well, thank you for the opportunity. It's a pleasure to be here today. And there really isn't a more timely or more appropriate topic for us to be having than to talk about the talent gap and how difficult it is to find the right employees in our region. So I'm really appreciative to have this opportunity. So who am I? My name is Jody Berg. I am a fourth generation leader of a family business that will be celebrating its 100th anniversary next year. And we specialize in whole food blending for the food service industry and for the home kitchen. So we are found in kitchens all around the world, whether it's a restaurant or a chain or possibly your kitchen at home. And we make our units right here in Northeast Ohio. So not only is our headquarters here, but also our manufacturing facilities are here. So we are looking continuously for top talent in every aspect of running a business, from research and development, from a product perspective, from running the organization, from information technology, all the way down and around to manufacturing equipment. We even have an in-house housekeeping team to make sure that our facilities are continuously clean and safe. So we're looking for everything. And our struggle is trying to find the right type of people. We've done really well on retaining people because we have a fabulous culture. But some of the systemic things in our region that we're going to talk about today are the very things that we've had to try to overcome to make sure that we can actually find the right number of really good people.
Thank you very much. Next up, Lindsey Domingo. Please tell us a little bit about yourself.
All right, thank you, Alan, and thank you very much for having us today. As you mentioned, we are definitely passionate about this topic, and certainly when it comes to talent, it is the most vital thing within an organization. You can't manufacture, you can't provide goods or services without your people. So this is definitely an important topic and a timely one because it's more challenging now than ever with much of the circumstances happening to organizations across the world. So again, thank you for having me. My background, I started actually in communications prior to talent management. So I started in comms. I moved into HR and talent management about 8 years ago. And at that time, I had worked for a Fortune 200 company and also in the area. And now most recently with Swagelok for about 2 years. So I have the honor of working for such a wonderful company that I've grown to love. And as Jody spoke to, we have a similar culture in that we really have niche people that we look for, people that are very passionate and love what they do and come to work each and every day just with that passion pouring out of them. So similar to what Jody said, we have manufacturing in the area. Most of our manufacturing is in Northeastern Ohio, as well as some in the Isle of Man and also in Changshu, China. We have global sales and service centers all across the world. So really when it comes to Northeast Ohio, because we have our headquarters here in addition to many manufacturing facilities, we are looking for soup to nuts when it comes to talent. So everything from our shop floor operators, machining, tooling, assembly, all the way through all of our functional groups. So really interested to hear more from Andy and Jody about what they do in these spaces, and happy to share some of the things that we do at Swagelok.
Very good. Thanks, Lindsay. And last but not least, Andy Jones. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, thanks, Alan. And as the two ladies said, we're super excited to be part of this panel today and participate in the conversation. We're an IT organization. We focus primarily on data security and environmental impact of IT. Northeast Ohio, the region, has a long history of manufacturing, obviously, and everyone that grows up in the region knows that manufacturing requires a certain amount of raw materials. What we do as a business is a people business. Yes, there's software. Yes, there's technology. Yes, there's IT assets, but it's really about people and people development. So for us, finding and acquiring those raw materials and being able to build something meaningful and lasting with those raw materials is kind of foundational to our business. It's foundational to every business. So I would argue that we have two kind of principles here. Every organization is an IT organization, and every organization is a people organization. So I think the topic is timely. I think it's important, and it's something near and dear to my heart. I grew up in the industry as a technician. I started on the IT side of the world, so I understand the technology. I'm also from Eastern Kentucky and a product of an environment that would not lend itself, at least at that time, to being an IT technologist. So I can personally attest to what the transformative benefits are to education or training and making investments in people. So super excited to be part of this.
Thank you very much. Well, before we tee up our discussion, a couple things that I just wanted to touch on. Obviously, we all know there is no one silver bullet or magic bullet to address the talent challenges that we all face across both IT, manufacturing, and healthcare. When we look at it from a total employee life cycle perspective or a talent life cycle perspective, we focus on the attract piece and then the hiring. But really, one of the things I'd like for us to get out of our conversation is what do we do to further develop and grow that talent internally? And then also from a retention perspective. So as we go into our discussion, I'd love for us to talk about that. I'd love to share a few things that we're doing within the Metro Health System along those lines. So we've got a really unique feather in our cap, if you will, in that we have the Lincoln West School of Science and Health located physically on our main campus. It is a STEM school, part of the Cleveland Metropolitan School District. And we've been able to really leverage that school and that relationship with CMSD as a pipeline of talent. Looking at the student makeup of that school, about 48% of our students, English is at least a second, if not third or fourth language. From a racial and ethnic diversity perspective, about 80% of our students are students of color, and they come from all over the city. So it's really interesting that we have such a rich cultural dynamic. But a couple of the key nuances around this school is that because these students are located here on campus, they have an opportunity to interact with people who look like them, who are in roles that they aspire to get to at some point. So really being able to develop those both informal and formal networking relationships, the coaching, the sponsorship, and really carrying that not only through your high school years, but as they go off into college as well. So what we've been able to do is pair up students with folks from the Metro Health System to kind of shepherd them through, because I think all of us can attest back to our collegiate days. Every now and then we probably needed to get that little kick in the butt to get a little bit more motivated. So we're there for them in that regard as well. Other things that we've been able to do is we've actually launched STNA, so the state nursing assistant programs, as well as dental assistant programs. So you could conceivably graduate from high school with a certification, working at a job as a dental assistant or an STNA, and really make decent money right off the bat. You know, at 18, 19 years old, I think back, being able to make at least $15 an hour, that wasn't a possibility for me. So really trying to help people get a competitive wage. The other thing that we're doing, and then I really want to hear from you all, we've got a partnership with Tri-C, Cuyahoga Community College, around a job access center. So it's not only focused on our employees who have an opportunity to further their education and compete for future jobs, but also for folks within the local community as well. So what I'd like to understand from you all is, how's your company identifying future jobs and corresponding skills that are going to be needed for your workforce today as well as tomorrow? And how are you incorporating those things into your longer term hiring needs?
One of the big challenges in our sector is, and I've had this conversation with the folks from Team Neo and others over the last couple of years, the job titles that we're hiring for today didn't exist 5 years ago in many instances. The positions, the technology moves and advances at a rate that a traditional or a classical training and a traditional and classical education system doesn't support this type of rapid evolution or rapid innovation. So in some instances, we've had to look for non-traditional mechanisms to create opportunities or to create hiring opportunities or locate candidates. For instance, I would suggest that we've looked for non-traditional outlets in other industries or other segments. For instance, in our field specifically, you'd mentioned some of the certifications there with Metro, the STNA and whatnot. Those are, in my opinion, those are great programs because they give the youth something tactical and tangible that they can immediately start earning an income on and then build from there. For us, in many instances, a college degree or a college education, what was once a kind of a cornerstone or a must-have before you could even be interviewed, now is starting to move more and more into well, that's a nice to have, but what we're really looking for is this broader set of skills. The formal degree, if you will, an associate degree or a baccalaureate or a master's for that matter, seems to be more of a proof that you have the ability to learn, or at least the ability to have that kick in the pants, as you mentioned, and have somebody force you to learn. We're looking more and more for those folks that have an interest in developing new skills on a continuous basis. We almost need to reimagine the way training programs are built, not just for our own internal systems, but how the educational systems and entities that exist today, how they can help feed some of those.
Well, I just want to pull on that thread for 1 second. I love how you mentioned a degree or equivalent experience, because, when we think about our military veterans, translating all of those experiences that they've had in their military career, a lot of times that's difficult to translate into a resume, but those are skills that you won't get in a traditional, baccalaureate or associate's degree path.
Absolutely.
Way. So I think we as leaders across all of our organizations have to really expand our thinking and be far more flexible around that educational versus experience component. One of the things that we've done is we've really looked at all of our job descriptions for those non-clinical roles. Obviously, if you're a nurse, you need to have that nursing degree. But for our non-clinical roles, we've made it degree or equivalent experience, just based on that very fact.
I'll give you an example. Obviously, when it comes to, we're all in sales in some way, shape, or form, and obviously everyone has to hire people that go out and will tell their organization's story and help customers solve problems. We've actually had great success in hiring educators, people that have degrees in teaching, to come to our organization and become quote unquote salespeople. They have the ability to digest it and regurgitate it in such a way that what we do is understandable to the common person on the street. So just an example of looking outside of the traditional box that you would normally look at.
And Dr. Berg, you have you mentioned that you're, I believe you said third or fourth generation. So it's fourth. So it sounds like Vitamix is very focused on growing and developing their talent, really from a grassroots level on up. So how are you all looking at the longer term hiring needs within your organization?
So I'm glad you pointed out that the longevity has something to do with it. We just celebrated, we celebrate all milestone anniversaries, and we have two very, very talented engineers that have been with us for over 35 years.
Wow.
And they didn't start in engineering. In fact, I don't think either one of them even has an engineering degree, and they're two of our most talented engineers.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because they understand blending, and they understand and they think the way an engineer thinks. but they don't necessarily, they need to have the degree in engineering. And as Andy was talking, I was thinking about that it's not just, it's even not just in engineering, it's in other places. My mind goes back to some of the amazing people that we have in our supply chain that started on our production line. So yes, we do have a lot of those systems in place, and maybe we take them a little bit for granted. But we, one of the hardest places for us to fill is kind of this front line. If you're kind of in our supply chain where you're manufacturing the products, but it's such a funnel for us to help people get their feet on the ground and get started with, as Andy said, technology just changing so rapidly. We have our own information technology system in-house because we're really a leader in the food service and consumer space when it comes to relationships. And so we need to have the technology, not only in how the system works to pull together everything from manufacturing to getting it out the door, but that relationship connection with your employees and customers, that's all about technology today. So we use a lot of outside resources, but we also need it in-house, and it is changing so fast that internal development is key in that space. The other one that's really key for us with the engineering, when you're the leader in an industry, we have to be thinking continuously about where's the puck going? What else are people going to need that they don't even know they need yet when it comes to high performance blending and food processing? And so that's something that we've relied on when different challenges come up, like the talent shortage and in the key areas, is to think outside our box and say, where is it going? So how might we use some of these different trends to be able to solve some of those challenges?
Thank you.
So
Lindsay, tell us a little bit about what's going on at Swagelok. How are you looking at this? Are there any intangible skills from a future job perspective that perhaps you guys weren't thinking about a couple years ago?
Yeah, so listening to both Andy and Jody talk about the versatility of talent, I think that's exactly what we're doing as well. So one of the nice things about Swagelok, and many of our associates will tell you this, is we have a lot of cross-functional movement. And that cross-functional movement really breeds agility. People are able to move into different roles. They bring different skill sets, and that pushes the boundaries of the way we think. So we have many of those examples. One that just comes to mind for me is our field engineering. So we really look, a diamond in the rough is an engineering person who can be a salesperson because they can go to our customers and not just sell the product, but sell a solution. And that's really what we're looking for all across the company, not just in field engineering, but who are those people that can bring a different type of skill set, an engineer to HR, or a marketing to another function. That's what really helps us to keep the wheels turning, to make sure that we're staying ahead of things that could potentially be happening in the organization, and really making sure that we're developing all of our associates to their full potential. I think another nice thing that does for us is it allows us to create, career-long Swagelok associates. They are not moving from Swagelok to go to another organization to get that experience, because they know they can do it right at home. So I think we get a lot of people who join the organization and they say, we heard this about Swagelok. We heard that you do a great job moving talent just based on performance. Someone performs well, they show that agility, they show the ability to lead, and the organization is really willing to take a chance and put them in a role completely outside of their comfort zone for a developmental opportunity, which also can have great organizational impact as well.
I would agree. Agility and adaptability are such critical competencies nowadays when we look at not only incoming talent, but also for those folks who have been here for a number of years. Similar to what Jody mentioned, we've got at least one employee that I know of that has more than 50 years with the system. Yet he reinvents himself on a regular basis in terms of continuing to educate himself and learn. And it's interesting. You think about where we are now versus a year ago. We're in the midst of two pandemics. We've got COVID, which is a virus of the body. We've got systemic racism and bias, which in my mind is a virus of the mind. How are you all handling the training, for instance? I would assume you all have a percentage of your staff who are now working remotely. How is that working? What are you learning? Any best practices you'd like to share with each other and with our audience?
That has been a huge focus for my team over the last 6 months or so since we've been in this. A couple, I would say, of the really big wins we've had in this space is we've been focusing on our shop floor of utilizing technology to be able to train through social distancing. So we've been using GoPros, the headsets that you would see, RealWear, so that our trainers are able to stand back and view the person who is working on the machine with an iPad in their hand, and then those that are actually watching the training in a separate room. So that started with our hourly workforce development team, which we have a fairly large team that helps to train our shop floor associates. And that has really spread through the organization. So we now have our marketing teams looking at that for sales training, our engineering. So I mentioned before those field engineering type associates that are really out in the field and needing to get hands-on technical advice when they're up close with a product or a machine. So we're using that technology. And then on the core or the leadership side, just a lot of virtual training. So we've quickly shifted. We did almost all of our training in person in the past. And so we realized how agile we actually were when we had to change that, at the drop of a dime. So we are now shortening our training, doing much more bite-sized type learning, trying to keep it 90 minutes or less, because we realize that it's difficult to stare at your screen all day long for our office associates. So we've converted a lot of our cohort-based programs over to virtual. And then we are doing what used to be our in-person large-scale learning events. We have transformed them into virtual events that will be taking place this fall. So we focused on 3 core competencies that we'll be helping to develop all of our leaders. So really it's been that shift of we can't do what we used to do and bring people in a room for 3 days straight for a program. So how can we spread it out over time and use technology and different engagement techniques? So we're really using polling and all kinds of games and quizzes and different things to keep the associates engaged as they work through that.
I know in our preparation meetings, all of you talked a little bit about the partnerships that you have with local high schools, colleges, workforce development organizations. Obviously, those relationships have to work a little differently now, given the social distancing and everything else. What are you learning so far, and how has that impacted your ability to really customize some of the training, internships that you might have? What are you having to do differently?
We have 2 primary vehicles that we use. One is at the higher end of skill set. We partnered with several local universities, and our primary partnership is with Mercyhurst University and their Cyber Education Center, the MCPc Cyber Education Center, to help build pre-qualified, ready to go kind of cyber warriors, if you will, that can come directly out of college with a bevy of internships and have the ability to directly impact our organization and our clients' organizations, or frankly, anyone in the region. We built it not solely for the purpose of feeding our own voracious needs for that type of talent, but also to build more of that talent in the region and just make it available because there's a dearth. At the collegiate level, it's been relatively easy to manage. The colleges, they're already used to a virtual learning environment. So to some extent, given that much of the cyber warfare that we're fighting is obviously very much in a logical or a virtual environment to begin with, the extension or the natural extension of doing those internships virtually or remotely, it really doesn't matter. Obviously, there's a little bit of that kinship that's lost between the mentor and the mentee that you can't replace through a lunch over a coffee or what have you, and you're doing it virtually, and it's not quite as an intimate scenario. But by and large, we've been able to manage that. On the more entry level end, we've been partnered for the last couple of years with Cleveland Metropolitan School District and their School of One, where we have the opportunity of working. We provide a facility here in town where students that participate in the School of One can go, at-risk students can go and finish their high school experience. And then at the same time, we provide them gainful employment in the afternoon where they're learning entry-level IT skills, whether it's IT asset recycling or data destruction or what have you, things that they could, very similar to the STNA program that you mentioned, Alan, to be able to have some set of skills that are immediately deployable right out of high school, and give them a reason, frankly, to finish high school and have that diploma in their hand. That one's been a little bit more challenging, just given the nature of the work. It's very physically demanding, and it requires a tactical touch to it. So being able to ingest those youth, and we're talking 15, 16, 17-year-old kids, to bring them into that environment has been it's been less of a challenge for us on the technical and the logistical aspect of doing it, and more from a policy, because they're still governed by the standard rules and regulations that their local governing school board or the governor puts out. So it's been a little bit more of a challenge, but we think we have a strategy in place here for the fall to be able to continue or perpetuate that program. We've been fortunate. This is our third year participating in the program, and we had our first, again, for a group of youth that were at risk and a very low percentage would graduate. We've been fortunate so far that all the kids that go through the program that we've participated in, everyone has graduated, and we offered the first 3 kids full-time employment after graduation, doing the very thing that they've been training on for 2 years. So we're very optimistic in what that transformative path could be for those youth of Cleveland.
Anything either of you would like to add, Jody or Lindsay?
Yeah, I'll go next, and I'm sure Lindsay has programs as well. So we've always partnered with different organizations like Magnet to bring in anyone who's bringing in students who are learning about manufacturing or supply chain. But what we experienced, and I referenced this a little bit earlier in the conversation, that one of the hardest positions for us to fill is really that entry level position on our production line. And it's a beautiful facility. It's in air conditioning. Like, there's all sorts of reasons why this would be a great place to work. But there's just what we stepped back and said, why is it so hard to find people? And one of the things that we realized is in Cleveland, we have employment deserts where we've got talented people who want to work, but there isn't the employment around them. And we're not located near them. So that was one of our challenges. And the other one was this, because of some of the socioeconomic circumstances, some people were graduating from high school and they absolutely could go into some further education or even certification programs, but either they personally needed to go immediately into the workforce, or their family was saying, no, we need you to be in the workforce. And that is exemplified really with some of the experience that College Now has had, where they're helping people get full ride scholarships. And they said that the dropout rate of people that have these full ride scholarships was extremely high, because either they didn't know how to succeed in college, and or being able to go to college and it was more important that they earn money than it was that they actually get a degree. So we put all of these different challenges that we were experiencing together, and a group came together. We're actually piloting a new program that's called Learn and Earn. And what we're bringing organizations like Baldwin Wallace is partnering with us to bring in the instructors. And we were doing this, fortunately, we've been working on it for probably about 9 to 12 months now, and we're piloting it this fall. I'm actually pretty excited about it. So Baldwin Wallace is going to provide the professors. College Now is already working to find students who have the aptitude to continue to learn. We have a facility and jobs that we could literally be pulling people in if we can get them the transportation to come out, and we know when they're going to start work and they're all going to finish work at the same time. So it doesn't require them to have their own form of transportation. We can figure out the transportation piece of it, and that they can work at Vitamix for full-time, 30 hours a week. Mm-hmm. If we go into an overtime mode, then they could be working more than the 30 hours a week, but 2 hours a day in the middle of the day. It includes part of a lunch break, but also we have instructors that will come in to teach them college classes. Eventually this will be expanded for certifications as well, but we're piloting it with college classes. And then we've got Vitamix employees who the second half of that hour and throughout the week will be coaching and mentoring them to help them succeed in the college environment, to help them learn, to help them study, to help them write their papers, whatever homework they need to do. So by the end of the workday, they can go home. They don't then have to go to school. They don't then have to study. They've done all of that in their workday. So they can come in and be working plus be pursuing their education. And if we can overcome some of the other things like the transportation and then finding the pool of smart kids who maybe are coming just out of high school and would like to go to college, if we could give them, just make it easier for them to succeed.
Right.
So the dream or the vision, if you will, and there's a Swagelok facility in Strongsville right around the corner from us. Imagine a world where that you don't have to have a vehicle. You can get yourself through high school and or get your certificate from high school, whether you actually finished it or not, get your GD. And then you can go to work full time. And during that 2-hour break, if you're pursuing this track, maybe you go over to the Swagelok facility that's just right up the street. If you're pursuing maybe the supply chain track, you stay at Vitamix. If you're pursuing a certain certification, then you go to another facility that's not that far away. And we could have hundreds of incoming students who wouldn't normally be able to go to school and even possibly be working, earning, and pursuing further education. So that's the dream. And we have a pilot going in this fall. And if it works, then we're hoping that we can expand it.
I love your suggestion around partnerships. All too often, we assume that our respective industry verticals or companies are so unique, when at the end of the day, it's really about helping this community. It's about building Greater Cleveland. And that allows all of us to say, viable organizations, and keep our talent here. I hear too many young people who, once they have attained their degree, well, I'm going to leave Greater Cleveland. And there is that talent drain. So, hats off to what you all are doing. Lindsay, what's happening at Swagelok?
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple of things come to mind that we haven't touched on in terms of community and what we're doing to attract talent, to get our name out there and really make sure that we're partnering with local organizations. One of the nice things that we have is every one of our directors, vice presidents, our C-suite, all serve on local boards in Northeastern Ohio. Each person has at least one board, and many of those boards are manufacturing related, industry in the area, or related to jobs. And so we want to make sure that we are listening to what our boards are working on locally and supporting those. So I know Jody had mentioned Magnet, our vice president of operations serves on the Magnet board, and we have a number of others as well. So we're trying to keep a really close pulse and support in those areas, and that also leads to the pipeline and really the areas that we're involved in. So we do have about 6 total locations locally that we work with in terms of career centers, adult programs, high schools, Tri-C, of course, being one of those. And we structure them so that they're in a radius to our facilities. So they're between 25 to 30 miles. That way we're able to make sure that we're attracting talent locally so that they're able to come in to our programs. So we have a lot of success with those. We really get a lot of great talent through those, particularly our adult programs. We find those to be highly successful. High school isn't always as successful. Sometimes they end up being successful later. They go to college and they come back to us, but that's great too. It's certainly part of what we want to do for the community is spread the word about manufacturing and the jobs that are out there. So really we see some of our programs being less about our product and manufacturing and more about what we can do for the community in terms of providing development to either students that are in high school or in career programs. In addition to that, not just from an attraction standpoint, but we also partner with local organizations for ongoing development. So we have put a lot of focus into what we call our 101, 201, 301 programs, and we have those for a number of roles. So things like assembly, machining. We have courses for our primary operators. And what we do is we have many of those courses are trained internally by our hourly workforce development team. So we have about 15 people or so that provide all of that initial training, onboarding, as well as movement. So when you're moving from, levels, we have different levels within, say, an assembler. They're going through that training internally. But as they get to higher levels of that, we actually partner with Tri-C. So it makes a lot of sense for us from a sustainability standpoint. If we are doing it often to be more efficient, we'll do it in-house. But if it's something that we're not doing as often, we partner with Tri-C. And so we're able to pull on their skill sets, their machines, and they're therefore, bringing more jobs to Northeast Ohio. So we have a couple of different touch points with the community. All the way from, where we serve as far as boards, keeping the pulse there, and then through our hourly workforce as well.
Hey, Andy, I'd be remiss if I didn't touch on your being on the front lines in this new normal. In terms of IT, you've got the risks of phishing and hackers and all of those things. What message would you give CEOs of companies even outside of Northeast Ohio in terms of overcoming IT talent challenges, as well as everything as it relates to phishing? I know for myself, we have a little phishing button on our Outlook, and anytime I get an external email, I have a tendency to just hit that button regardless of whether it's phishing or not, because I don't want to get in trouble. So what advice would you have for us with that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I can tell you this, in the first month, from about March the 15th to April the 15th, when things really started to settle in, at least in Northeast Ohio, obviously the coasts were already a little bit more engulfed in it. But in that 1 month, that 30-day period, we saw not just MCPc, the industry saw a 300% increase in attempts to breach systems. And all of it was based around COVID or COVID-related things. And we were all, as humans, were desperate to get any kind of information we could. That was one of so anything that said, "Here's the latest information on COVID," we had a tendency to want to click on that, regardless of all the training and behavioral modification that we've all went through. The second one, and for those that have a lot of mobile workers or remote work from home workers, the second most common breach, an attempt at breach with spear phishing, has actually come about from FedEx, UPS, DHL, and the carriers. Now, where if you had a mail stop in your office, somebody would bring you a package or you would go and get your mail. Now we have much more common that packages are being delivered to our associates' homes because they need wedding signatures or they're taking the delivery of some product. We're seeing people that normally wouldn't get a quote-unquote FedEx now get emails saying your FedEx is en route, click here to release it. And they are expecting a FedEx because that's the new norm now for your equipment at home or your mail at home. And they're falling, unfortunately, for that. So I think extreme diligence is the price that we're all going to have to pay over the next several months as we all adjust to this new norm. As far as the overall theme of finding, acquiring, retaining, developing IT talent, we have, as an industry, probably the largest challenge we've had that I've ever faced in my nearly 30 years in the space now. The lack of available talent, especially in cyber or cyber-related fields. There was some data. I had the pleasure of serving on Team Neo's Talent Development Council, and among other things, one of the data points that has been shared and has come out over the last year is that in cyber in particular, we see a negative, this is just in the US, there's a negative 6% unemployment, which of course means there's about 40,000 more jobs that are advertised a year for hiring than there are even people eligible to come and take those jobs. So we've got a kind of a double-edged sword going on right now, where you have this market rise in this type of, frankly, terrorism, and I don't use that word lightly, where organizations like Jody's organization are regular targets for this kind of attack to steal IP or manufacturing processes. So you've got this ever increasing rise that's ever present and getting worse. And then you have this amazing dearth of talent that we as an industry simply can't keep up with. And whether that's the schools, and this shouldn't be construed as a political statement, but a good deal of the talent that was available here in the U.S., especially in IT, did come in through visas, and that process is all but shut down over the last couple of years. So we're seeing an even greater pressure for that. I think one of the things that we could do, and the good news is there is a solution. The bad news is, like most solutions, it's not a light switch. It's going to require hard work and investment. One of the things, and again, I apologize, it's the engineer in my nature. I look for limiting factors, and I look for ways to solve those limiting factors. In Northeast Ohio, we have a tremendous amount of raw material and talent. You could look at East Cleveland and look at the underdeveloped communities. As I said, I grew up in Eastern Kentucky. Education was not the highest of priorities in Eastern Kentucky, although that has obviously changed over the last 30 years. I would suggest that an intense focus on the underutilized talent that already exists in the region, those raw materials. Every dollar that we invest in education or training into these communities pays the community, not only that community back, but pays the region back in whole. We're either paying for it, and I mean this in a completely sincere way, the community's either paying for it in terms of social support systems or policing actions. We're paying for it in some way. Why wouldn't we pay for it by investing in the human being and transforming that person's life? There's a job for everyone. And I think the IT shortage, you don't have to go to a 4-year degree university to get an entry-level IT job. That's a misnomer. That's a myth. Some of the most talented CIOs I know actually never finished a college degree. So you can learn these skills as you go. And I think to some extent it's part of the transformation. This isn't unique to Northeast Ohio, but it's part of the transformation that the industry as a whole needs to move away from this idea of everyone has to go to college. We need continuous education programs. I'm sure you've all seen the announcements. Microsoft made an announcement that they're going to train, I think it was 150,000 people, if I'm doing the math right, via LinkedIn. Google has made similar commitments to training, especially in underdeveloped or undeveloped sections of the country. I think there's a huge opportunity, especially in Northeast Ohio, to solve this for ourselves. Birmingham did a similar model a couple of years back, where they took 100,000 of their citizens, minority-based primarily, people of color, and invested in that community. And they solved a couple problems. One, they solved what is to some extent a drain on the society as a whole, because they don't have the right skills to develop from a workforce standpoint. And two, they created an amazing new outcome for all of those citizens and their families. And three, they created a self-fulfilling prophecy. All of a sudden, they had 100,000 trained IT workers. If you're going to open a new business, where do you go? Where there are no available assets and you're going to beat your head against the wall, or Birmingham? It seems obvious to me. So hopefully we'll have some political will here in the very near future to do something about this.
It's funny to play on your Eastern Kentucky roots. My mom is from Mississippi, and one thing my mom always said, book sense doesn't equate to common sense.
No.
So your example of Birmingham it just makes common sense.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, absolutely. So we're going to go ahead and get ready to wrap up. Final comments from Jody and then from Lindsay. What advice would you give a peer of yours as we tackle this new reality?
The one piece of advice I would share is that when you get to a point where you're faced with incredible disruption, I've discovered three groups of people. You've got this one group of people that wants to just maybe bury their head and wait for the storm to end. And then they'll go out and they'll assess the damage and they'll fix everything. Mm-hmm. And COVID isn't going to be one of those short little storms that's going to end, right? So encouraging that group of people to think differently. And the second bucket of people are the people that they simply want to fix it. Like how quickly can I put it back to how it was before? And we're not going back. And almost, thank goodness we're not going back, right? There's so many, if we get to a point where you can now cover up the holes that are in the side of the boat, right? You keep the water from flooding in. Now's the opportunity to think about what's possible because life is so different. And that's where the group of people that we really focused on. So early on, we certainly had to go into crisis management mode and make sure we buttoned down our hatches. And quickly we went into business sustainability mode. Probably within the first 14 days, we were already switching to, I had a wonderful group of people involving all of our employees to figure out the crisis management and keeping everyone safe. Another group was working in business continuity. And then very quickly, we moved him into business, we called it business thriving, like what's next, what's possible because of COVID. So if you're not already in this space of what's possible because, I guess my advice would be get there as soon as possible. Bring amazingly talented emerging leaders and give them a chance to lead in the crisis management mode. Give them a chance to lead in the business sustainability mode, and pull in your emerging leaders that naturally are thinking about the possible, and they see obstacles as not roadblocks, but stepping stones into something different, and pull all of those employees that you have in your workforce and give them an opportunity to develop themselves and find what they're capable of, because nobody's ever really been through this before. So thinking that we should rely on leaders that are trained in this is a missed opportunity, right? So my advice would be just pull everybody that you possibly can into this amazing experience. Keep yourself safe, but then think of it as an amazing experience to think of the possible. And let's get excited about what this world is going to look like as a result of the fact that we were forced off our axis to look at things differently.
Very good. Lindsay.
Sure. So some advice that I'd give, I mentioned it earlier when we were talking, and it goes to a little bit of what Jody was talking about as well, as agility, really focusing on building it within your teams and finding it and making or asking those people to lead from the forefront. You know, this is certainly unprecedented. It's uncharted. You can't call somebody else up who's done it before and say, how would you do this? Because this just doesn't exist unless you can find someone from Spanish flu time. That's about as lucky as you would get. And there was no virtual back then. So this is definitely different. But certainly, you know, I think it's the finding the talent. So we talked, you know, about the life cycle, Alan, you know, finding the talent. We are searching for talent with that agility, searching for talent that can, you know, stay ahead of what's happening, that can think differently, think outside the box, stay positive. You know, there is no doubt we don't know what's ahead. And so there's setbacks, you know, each and every day, but taking a positive outlook on that and learning from it is really key to what we're looking for in terms of attracting talent, and then developing it. So yes, there are some people who might not have it today, but you know, if you keep that growth mindset, which I definitely do, everyone has the muscle to build it. And so if you might not be as agile as you want today, you can be more agile by just working on that development. So whether that be, you know, training from a formal standpoint through courses or through experiential learning, you know, encouraging your leaders to push those people to think outside the box and, you know, give them assignments that stretch them, encourage them when they take risks. You know, certainly if you fail, that's not a setback. It's something that you should learn from and hopefully just approach differently going forward and share those failures. You know, absolutely. You know, our HR management team, we actually have a section of our weekly agenda that we share our failures. And that's part of being agile. So making sure that you can learn from that and people know you're human. People want a human leader that shows the fact that they are willing to take those chances and can learn from them. So I think, you know, looking for the talent, building it, succession planning for it. So making sure those people are really the ones that you are investing in to try to get them to the next level so that they have more visibility to lead in those spaces, because they will breed more agility in the organization. So that would be my nugget, is to focus on agility in all aspects of the associate life cycle.
You know, and building on her wonderful nugget is we have so many incredible resources in Northeast Ohio, and they are here to help in all of the things that Lindsay just talked about and what I talked about. We've got Team Neo, you've got your local chambers, we have incredible universities, even the libraries. Like there's this incredible wealth of Magnet and other organizations and associations, and now Magnets with manufacturing, and I'm sure Andy has other organizations, associations that have to do with the IT part, but we have incredible resources available to us. And if you're not feeling, oh, I'm not big enough to be able to have all this in-house, and even if you are big enough and you just want to expand your thought partners, then reach out to these incredible resources.
Some of the best advice I ever got was probably 20 years ago, and I was told that leaders have to get really comfortable with being uncomfortable. I would suggest that maybe a modernized version of that is, in the absence of certainty, we'll have to settle for clarity as we make our way through these times. To everyone's point, and Jody said it the best, I think, it's not going to go back to where it was. And I don't know that we necessarily as a collective group want it to go back to where it was. Mm-hmm. The only thing we can try to do is, since your question was, what would your advice be to the leaders? I would say continue to lead with your heart. And Alan, since you brought up your mother, whatever decision you make, would your mom be proud of the decision you made? So.
Very good. Very good. Well, it has been a privilege and a pleasure to have a chance to talk with such esteemed colleagues. I look forward to working with you offline around some of the things that you're doing, because I really think there's an opportunity for us to set aside our specific industries and just do what's right for this region. And I think, when you get a couple people together and they start sharing best practices, only good things, in fact, great things can happen. So it has indeed been a privilege and a pleasure. Thank you very much. And I think it's a wrap.